Hi, how are you? This is Dr. Damaris Maria Grossman, and this is the Mindfully Integrative Show. And today we have an awesome mindful chat with Dana Miranda. She is the healthyrich.co, and she's going to talk to you about your health in realms of personal finance and how does that go and what does that really mean. So I really can't wait for you to talk with her and discuss further, because I can tell you in my experience, the more that I learned about money, the better I felt about my health. So let's chat. How's it going?
Hi, Damaris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's going great. I'm really excited to bring these topics together.
that's really cool. So how have you so first off, I always say, what's a little fun fact that people may not know about you if they're looking you up?
Yeah, so definitely something that's never in my bio because it tends to not be relevant to the work I do now. But in high school, I was kind of like a I was a good student in high school. I was a cheerleader and an honor roll student. I went to a great state university, and then I dropped out of college before earning my degree, and have like kind of always taken like a counter path since since then. So it's always kind of fun to like let people know that I was a cheerleader and an honor roll student, because I don't think that they often expect that.
Yeah, but well, I mean, you didn't finish college per se, but I mean, you could always
Mhm.
get a degree like in without done if you really wanted to, right? At this point.
Yeah. And I've got the experience in my career. I feel like I got
Yeah.
my degree in, being a
In life.
writer and yep, and in life.
And when you're a writer, so how much have you've
Mhm.
also written too?
Yes. Yeah. I've been working primarily as a writer for a little over a decade, working as a freelance writer, and I was a staff writer and editor for 4 years. That's how I got my start in personal finance specifically. Before that, I was just kind of a generalist freelance writer. And then I got my first job with a site called the Penny Hoarder. It was a personal finance media startup. And I didn't know anything about finances when I started. I just knew about writing and reporting. And so I learned about personal finance through that job and really kind of fell in love with it.
That's great.
And then went on the last 2 years, have been working full time as a freelancer again with other
Companies, yeah.
publications in the industry, and decided to start Healthy Rich because I wanted to um, have my own approach, create a platform and create a space for some of the voices that I'm not hearing as much and seeing in the space in the work that I've been doing so far.
I love it. So so first let's kind of like go with, you went from, you're a writer, so obviously you're good with
Mm-hmm.
your words and good interpreting and discussing things. But what brought you into this? Like you said, you were with someone previous in personal finance. What is kind of your platform? Like, what is it, your interpretation, or what kind of got you to there? Because like I think for
Mm-hmm.
me, I was like, just overly spending emotionally thinking, and I was like, okay, and I got to get what I need in this, and I was feeling a void. What was it that made you change and turn to say, hey, I want to like learn this and teach other people about it?
So as a writer, I've always been focused on both education and storytelling are kind of the things that I really enjoy. So I love sharing other people's stories as an editor. I love helping other people tell their stories through my podcast the same way. I love talking to
Yes.
other people, letting them tell their stories. And as an educator, I love kind of breaking down and demystifying any complex topics. And in personal finance, there's no end to the complex topics that we need to kind of unravel. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing that. And that was part of like what I loved about personal finance. And I also loved sharing people's stories. So their journeys of kind of whatever it was to achieve their financial goals, even just like their experiences. And as I got more into the work, it became a lot more of what I was doing was on kind of the educational side, like breaking down the concepts, explaining things, answering people's questions. And I was missing the storytelling a lot. And also seeing that in personal finance media and in education, other platforms, I'm not seeing a diversity of voices. So from women, people of color, people with different like class backgrounds, LGBT people, people with disabilities. There's a lot of voices that are left out of the space, and the space is really dominated mostly by people with middle class backgrounds, white people, and men in a lot of cases. There are a lot of women, there are people of color,
Coming
kind
up
of
more, being more
yeah,
open,
we're
but not
seeing,
as much, little bit, little by little.
yeah, the biggest brands are still dominated by kind of white men. And so I wanted to hear more of those stories and
It's so
pull
important.
away from the more prescriptive kind of personal finance, just one right way of doing things, because I was seeing a lot of that. And I think we need to hear more of people's stories and experiences and understand the nuances more of our relationships with money. And we can really only do that through hearing a variety of stories. So I started Healthy Rich to make space for that and to focus on that kind of storytelling.
In the storytelling. But I mean, it's so important, like as a, like even for myself, I mean, I provide a space for people to tell stories in their health journey, right? And their overall health. But like having an individual like yourself on is so important, because personal finance, or there's many definitions. First off, we'll have to talk about what's your definition of personal finance and what's your goals. But I think it's as in very important aspect for people to understand where their mind is, and what is their history prior. A dollar could be something to one person, but a dollar is so different for someone else. And then that perception and their life's stuff, like all can really unravel. So I can imagine their stories are very different than if someone that was brought up rich and someone was brought up poor, or do they even understand what to do with that dollar, right? So I can, it can be pretty complex. I can just imagine.
Absolutely. And there's the obvious kind of like, what did you learn about money growing up? How much access to resources and wealth did you have? So your like direct relationship with money, but there's so much more about your life that affects your relationship with money. So your mental health is something people are talking about a lot more, and how things like anxiety and ADHD affect your spending behavior and your ability to stick to like all these things that people say are the right ways to handle money. Your physical health, having a chronic illness really affects your relationship with work, which directly affects your relationship with money. And the work that we do is, in our culture, unfortunately, really how we kind of like assign value to people. So when you're in a position to be unable to do work in the way that we kind of consider the right way to do it, it changes your relationship with yourself. It really changes kind of how you value yourself and how people around you value and treat you. And so all of that that's going on inside of you, your histories and your experiences, affect every decision in the moment that you make with money. So it's a lot more than just sort of the numbers and the kind of rules, and the boundaries that we want to set around money. It's all those things, your whole self, that you bring to every decision that you make.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I talk daily about this mindful way or mindful tips, right? And in that it's understanding the habits that you have and your previous baggage or whatever that may be. How do we change those patterns? And the pattern of money, it's part of the equation. You're trying to understand the money is going to give you more time and more freedom, or a better understanding of who you are. And I think that those patterns and those habits to change are a challenge. And like you said, it's the health can be overcome, or it can be identified, so then you can overcome. And I think it's super super important. So what is your definition of personal finance initially?
I love that question. And this is why I love coming into spaces that are not necessarily focused on personal finance, because no one in the space thinks to ask that question.
Oh yeah, so it's totally, so I have a totally different view than most of the people.
So that's why I love,
I mean,
new perspectives.
I'm wealthy in a lot
happens.
of realms, but I would like know what that means for you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really see, the personal finance niche is kind of a detour from traditional financial media, which was very focused on business and kind of the markets, like the larger kind of macro economy. And then personal finance in the last maybe 50 or so years came in and started talking about people's individual financial situations. And so we look at the niche as like household finances, income and budgets and expenses and things on an individual level. But I'm pulling back a little bit more and seeing personal finance, and I'm not alone in this. I am seeing it happen in the space and other places too, but this is my focus, is that it's about your relationship with money, what it means in your life, how it comes into your life, how you use it in your life. It's about money as one sort of pillar or input in your life. And I think it stands alongside things like health, physical health, mental health, food, diet, exercise, all these other pieces that sort of make up like who you are and the experience that you have day to day. I think I see personal finance as a piece of that.
I could not agree more. Financial health is in my chapter of one of my books.
Yes.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
So like, what's your take on, so I say health is wealth, in different aspects. What would your take on that be? How would that be for you? Just if that is, I don't know if that's if you can answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about, can you say a little bit more when you say health is wealth, what it means to you?
So when I talk about health as wealth, I identify it as in two aspects. One, in the financial, actual having money, the more financial means or understanding of, debt and not having as much, or having more availability gives you more time and freedom. So that the health then gives you more freedom to then do activities that will make you more pleasant. The other part of it is the health and the wealth of is just understanding, so that you are aware of where there might be some missteps.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I think they're all very, the ideas are very integrated. I think that health is, and you were touching on this a little bit, is a form of wealth. And I think that we need to think more about the different kinds of wealth that we have in life, in addition to the actual sort of financial assets that we own, which is a very important part of wealth that, gives us a lot of power and privilege. But there's also the wealth of privilege and the history that you bring in the, maybe the wealth of your family, not in the assets that they hold, but the abilities that they can provide for you and the care that they provide for you that some people don't have access to. All of those things affect your financial situation. And we're seeing that a lot in the discussion around student loan cancellation recently. I've seen some great discussions about what that means for people based on the history of wealth that they have, because debt is a very different thing if you come to it with an enormous amount of wealth versus if you don't. You're, the carrying that debt makes a big difference. But you need to expand kind of the way that you think of that wealth beyond just the financial side of it. So health is a form of wealth in that way. That's a really long-winded way of saying that your mental and physical health can really make a huge difference in your financial situation as well.
I know my questions are always a little different, but I just feel like you have literally a wealth of knowledge of talking about what is necessary for individuals. And I think the other part I was wondering, what's your take on so this was one where I had an argument with my husband about debt, understanding debt, because I learned it so different. Like I didn't know. And you're talking about student cancellation of having debt, not having debt, right? And so his take on it is still a little different than mine. I get it now in his perspective. But what is your take of debt, and whether you're wealthy or not, is it good or bad? Or are you indifferent?
I say that debt is morally neutral. So I would fall on indifferent. Absolutely. Okay. I think that there's no moral value to whether you decide to take on debt, why you decide to take on debt. And I also don't attach moral value to what you do once you have debt, how you pay it off, whether you do how you sort of deal with it in general. I don't think that there is a right way to do it. There's absolutely a way to deal with debt that could result in paying more or less interest on that debt, that would cost you more or less money over time, that would affect your credit score in a certain way. But none of that has to do with your intrinsic value, and none of that is a moral judgment. It is just a practical reality because of the way that our financial systems are set up. But there's a lot of debate about like what is good and bad debt to take on, and I don't think any of that is true for every person. I think it's all just what do you need in your life in the moment? Is that to take on debt? Is it to pay off debt quickly? Is it to set aside some debt that you have and deal with it at a later time? Is it to work out some strategy to slowly pay something off? There's tons of ways. Is it to declare bankruptcy? There's tons of ways to deal with debt in your life. And I think that they all are correct if they are what you need in the moment.
That's so interesting that you say it like in the moment, because it's like, when discussing with, like I said, my partner, he was like, oh, debt can be used very well. And I came from the camp, or grew up in the camp of, you have to really have no debt as much as possible other than your house and whatever. And I really didn't understand. I would straight up was like, oh, okay. Didn't realize you could leverage it like that, or use it in the right way. Or in general, I was also learning about these I mean, I guess I'm financially independent person that I could retire early in a sense, or you could probably also.
Congrats.
What's your take on that? Like debt, and people don't want any debt. Like they're like, okay, I want zero debt. Like I don't have a car payment anymore. My mortgage is paid through house hacking. What for you, what is that important? Or like you said, there's no like emotional part there.
For
people
me,
that want to be like no debt, they're like, I want zero debt, I want nothing to be worried. Is that important? Like my husband's the opposite, where he's like, oh no, I like to leverage something if I'm at 0%, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about. So I just so for me, I'm like, all right, does that mean I have more time? All right, that means I can go walk the dog. Okay, what are we talking?
Yeah, so 100% of the time, I would say it depends on your goals. So for me, I don't have an emotional attachment to debt, or sort of an emotional reaction to having debt. I know a lot of people are interested in paying off debts that they have, not because it's necessarily because it's the most financially sound move to make, but because having debt gives them anxiety. Like having debt can mean that you have unpredictable costs in the future. Yeah. And it can mean that you're going to get calls from collection agencies. I've been in that situation. That's very anxiety inducing. So there's tons of reasons that you might want to get rid of that, because it's not right to have in your life. I don't know. I don't have that. My goal is really just to like with my student debt in particular, is to just keep my monthly burden, like my burden in the moment, as low as possible. Is not to pay it off as quickly as possible. I'm also not trying to get a mortgage anytime soon. So the amount of debt that I have and how it affects my credit score is not a huge concern for me. For some people that might be. So there's tons of, that's where you have to look at kind of the practical effects in addition to the emotional.
Don't get a house if you don't have to. That's unless you're going to house hack, or like I have a 2 family. So like, or unless you're going to house hack, or do it if you don't need it.
Yeah, I enjoy renting. I enjoy the freedom of it and being able to just call somebody when something goes wrong and let them take care of it and move, easily whenever I want to. But I came from that same background of just debt is the worst thing that you can have. Like,
I know, I didn't know any better.
It was really considered just kind of like a moral evil, like a big sin to carry around debt. Other than, again, the mortgage, which is sort of this kind of assumed thing in our country, that like this is just how you do it because you're supposed to own a home, and so we take on these massive amounts of debt. And then for my generation too, we kind of did the same thing with student loan debt as well, without really understanding the implications of that. So if that is how you feel, I think the first step to dealing with debt that I always recommend is to get into yourself and figure out what is it about that debt? How do you feel about that debt? Like if you're trying to get rid of it, why do you want to pay down the debt? Is it because it's going to serve your higher goals in some way? Or is it just because you feel this pressure based on what you are supposed to do? What is the right thing that people are telling you to do? And if it's that, maybe investigate that a little bit. Is it the right thing for you?
I love that when you come into the sound of what are you like going back and underlying and looking at the root of where what's going on. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
talk about root cause of health in general, and now
Yes.
you're trying to talk about what's the root cause of why are you spending, underspending, or just your behavior? What is your
Mm-hmm.
behavior in this, and how can it be? I don't necessarily think it's a solving, but what is your solutions? And you're
Yes.
helping people find the solutions that is personalized for them because
Yeah.
everybody's situation is probably so different.
I think all those questions are probably very much the same. All of those root causes are very much the same. It's getting in tune with, people have different names for it, kind of like your inner child, like what are the experiences that your body is carrying from your childhood experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and how are those affecting what you're doing now, how you're reacting to the world around you now. Like that stuff creates mental health reactions, it creates physical health reactions, it affects how you deal with money, like it affects how you relate to food, all of those things.
Yeah,
It kind of ends
they're
up all being kind
intertwined.
of the same questions. Yeah.
I could not agree with you more. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. How can like those reach you? I know that you said you have you have a community.
Mm-hmm.
What is first off before that I want them to reach you? What is one major tip that you like to talk to people about? Like I know it's personal finance, but what's
Mm-hmm.
like a major theme that people ask you about?
Yeah. So it's, I talk a lot about what I call budget culture, which is kind of akin to diet culture, in that the way that we teach personal finance in general is focused on this prescriptive money advice and restriction and deprivation as a solution to all of your financial problems. It's
Mm-hmm.
very based on individual responsibility. And so my recommendation is to divest from budget culture and do a lot of what we have been talking about through this whole conversation, which is tap into yourself, feel into what's right for you, and think more about approaching spending in a mindful way that I call conscious spending, which is to use money
This is
in the way that
amazing.
feels
Oh my
right
God.
for you.
This is a
Yeah.
whole other realm. Like you're getting me into a whole other tap. Like you're
Yeah.
taking like the diet conscious world
Mm-hmm.
of, paleo diet, vegan diets, these people that are
Yeah.
getting so restrictive. You're taking it into a budget con thing.
Mm-hmm.
Having a budget isn't the right way of looking at it. And it's
Yeah.
like, wait, take a minute. You have to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and there's another way. And it's like
Yeah.
same thing with the nutrition and health stuff. If you don't take a
Mm-hmm.
step back and look at what's going on, the change isn't going to change. Your behavior won't change.
Yeah. Stop looking for rules from outside of you, and get to know yourself more, and figure out what is right for you. And a lot of what I like to do too as an educator is help people understand the why people say that those rules are correct, to kind of start to question the premise of just their kind of innate correctness, and instead understand like the reason that, for example, that we say certain kinds of debt are good and bad is because we start with this assumption that becoming as rich as possible and having as much wealth as possible is the goal. So
Mm.
if you understand that that's the premise, you can take a step back and start to question, is that my goal? And if that's not your goal, then why are you following the rules and the path that is meant to get to that goal? So you have to start to, understand where we're coming from as a culture and how you fit into it, and then get to know yourself, and make those moves that make sense for you.
Wow, that's pretty profound. I think people need to hear more of you. What
Thank you.
about your take on like all of these budget rules that people are giving you? Do you take pieces of each, or is it just very personalized when you're working with individuals?
It's very personalized. I don't give any individual advice
Right. You're not,
specifically because
but you're an educator.
yeah,
I mean, on your
right.
platform, you're
Yeah.
educating
So
individuals. Right.
understand what all of these approaches are, and probably no individual approach is right for you because it's made sort of generic. And so it can't be made for your situation, but there are things to be learned from all those approaches. And you can understand why those, kind of pieces that you can take, why those might work for you. But for the most part, I would say, be cautious against any kind of boundaries that someone else is setting, any restrictions that are being set by someone else, which a lot of budgets do, even when they're trying to be have more flexibility in them. That a budget in itself kind of by definition comes with restriction. So be cautious of taking on that restriction that's prescribed from outside of you.
That makes a lot of sense. How
Mhm.
about do you have a tip or one of your favorite kind of personal finance ways you'd like to share?
So one very kind of practical tip, like people kind of wonder, so then if you're throwing away the budget, like how do you practice conscious spending in reality? And
that conscious spending. Oh.
Yeah, in general, I would say you can sort of approach it with any kind of mindfulness techniques, which I know talk about a ton on this podcast. So anything that sort of helps you tap into yourself, like meditation and yoga. I personally recommend journaling a lot because it works for me, and because I think it's also a great bridge from people who are used to budgeting to do something like a spending diary, which is reflecting on the spending that you're doing, maybe in a day or a week or a month. But it's more than just looking at the money. It's taking time to actually kind of use that more like a journal as a reflective space. So to say, like, I spent $4.16 on a latte and I was meeting my friend and we had this conversation. So you can start to connect, see sort of the more holistic picture of where money fits into your life, rather than just a spreadsheet that shows I've been spending $40 a week at Starbucks, so I need to cut that out of my budget. Starting with journaling or any of those sort of mindfulness activities that helps you see the what that spending is contributing to your life can help you understand what cutting it out might mean. So if if you just say, I'm going to cut that Starbucks out of my budget, you might be missing out on all of those interactions that you were having with the people that you're meeting there.
Mm-hmm. Or
So
finding an outlet, like,
yeah.
or if that maybe it's not for Starbucks a
Mhm.
week, but it's like, okay, you're missing a connection. Like, it's so
Right.
pretty profound as you're talking about, as I talk about connections and health it's
Mhm.
important. Quality connections are so important to someone's health. They're going there for a social interaction.
Right.
That how do they still have that social interaction without spending 4 days maybe at a Starbucks,
Mhm.
right? Or something of that nature. I
Yeah.
don't know. But that is
Mhm.
so profound and mind opening, because what you're evaluating is, okay, you've spent probably, I don't know, $100 this week on Starbucks, but what's the reasoning behind it? This
Mhm.
connection. And then connections are so important. Like, oh my
Right.
God, especially because of this past health pandemic thing that happened, people are reaching for that. So now we're trying to see what can we still do to not cut it out. And I love that this not giving up, but kind of gaining.
Absolutely. Look at the purpose that it's serving for you. Are you ordering in food because it is giving you a moment to rest at the end of a week and time to spend with your family? There are a lot of reasons. And if you just sort of look at a list of how to spend less money, how to budget, they tend to just have these very impersonal pieces of advice that seem really obvious ways to cut spending out. But it doesn't consider the purpose that that's serving in your life.
I love
taking a personal look lets you question a little bit more and think about your relationship with money, how you're using money in your life, instead of just, a spreadsheet of numbers.
I hope I see a book from you, Conscious Spending.
I hope you do too.
I love it. It sounds
absolutely.
profound. I need to read it.
Thank you.
And you got to be on again for like a webinar or such, because I think there's plenty more for us to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's keep talking.
So thank you so much again. And how can we reach you?
You can find Healthy Rich at healthyrich.co. And the best way to stay connected, I recommend subscribing to our email list for free. You can get notifications of all of our content and messages from me. It's also just a great way. You can easily reply to any emails that I send out, and we can start a conversation, which I love. Like I was saying earlier, I want to hear kind of everybody's perspective and stories. And so it's a great way to connect with people individually. So yeah, healthyrich.co. If you actually go directly to healthyrich.co/subscribe, you can sign up for the newsletter right there.
Perfect. I'll put it in the show notes for those to reach you. And I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a lot of fun. And thank you guys for listening in. And as I say, make sure you find a mindful way each and every day. Have a wonderful day, whatever it is for you.